So we're going to continue this data modeling discussion, and I'm going to bounce back and forth between a few things. One is this Tech Plugin 5 document, but also I created this PowerPoint set of slides, which is a summary of the words that I'm using to help you get an idea of what we're talking about. Now, here's the 5 things you really need to know data modeling. I'm not going to read through each one of these slides, but I'll give you the highlights. Really, to understand data modeling, you want to know what entities are, attributes, later we'll talk about keys, instances, relationships, and cardinality, which describes relationships between the entities. Now, just briefly, a lot of people who don't like spreadsheets don't mind data modeling. It's actually kind of fun. It's like a puzzle. They are easy to read, very easy to read. But once you know how that is, they're more difficult to create, but they're actually pretty easy to create also. But they are very informative. They tell you a lot. And once you know how to read them, which is really pretty simple, you can tell a lot about a business and the way it works. Just so you know, business processes tend to be dynamic. Those change all the time. You order things from Amazon online, you order it in person. But whereas processes are dynamic, data models tend not to be. And most companies use similar kinds of data models in a particular industry, which means if you know one data model, you probably have a good idea of how it works in another organization. And it's useful to think of a data model as a skeleton. So if the business processes are the blood flowing in and out of your body, the data model is a lot more stable. It's a skeleton. So now let's turn to some of these terms. First of all, we said an entity is like a table. It's a person, place, thing, transaction, or event about which we want to collect data and store it somewhere. Customer is a person of interest to us. So a customer is a data entity. So is an item that we sell. So is a location from where we sell it, perhaps, or an order. These are all data entities, person, place, things, transactions, or events about which we want to collect information, and here they are. So later we'll learn entity relationship diagram ideas or terms, but generally we put the data entity, its name up here on the top. Customer, order, item, distributor are all entities. And then below we'll put the attributes used to describe them. So a customer has attributes describing it, things like first name, last name, street, city, state, zip code. You get the idea. An item has an item number. It might have a price, might have some descriptors, a release date, a genre. An order has an order number. It's linked to a particular customer, and it has an order date and maybe a status. Now, also, what's worth mentioning, the term instance, which we use. An instance, here's a customer instance, Sam Smith. Here's another customer instance, Bill Miller, John Doe, Jane Cook. These are described by attributes such as customer number, first name, last name. You get the idea. What does this practically look like in our spreadsheet example? Well, here's this whole thing that's called the customer data entity. You can almost think of it as like a tab on a spreadsheet if it were one table. The attributes are columns used to describe the data entity. So here's first name, last name. Those are attributes describing the data entity customer. Now these things, the rows, are called instances. And Anna Bedex is an instance of customer, so is Martin O'Donnell, so is Roland Wacker, Helen Kupkova, you get the idea. So the rows are instances, the columns are attributes. Now, one last thing. Then one or more attributes that uniquely identify an instance is called an identifier. And okay, come again. What did I just say? This is actually easier to visualize than it is to describe. One or more attributes that uniquely guarantee one instance is called an identifier. Now, can you see that in this table? Is there a particular attribute, so we're looking at columns, that will, if we knew it, it would guarantee us one row? And the short answer is, it's this ID column. If I know it is customer ID 5, then I'm guaranteed we're talking about Martin O'Donnell. And if I know that it's customer ID 21, you know we're talking about Bernard Tham. Now, this happens all the time. We come back here for a moment, and this is described right here. At Azusa Pacific University, you have a student entity. What is its identifier? Most likely your student ID. It uniquely identifies you from all the other students. That's why they ask you for it when you do things like register or whatever. It's because they want to make sure they have one and only one student. If you want one and only one order, you would probably want to know the order number. Now that means that if we know the order number, we can look and see, identify one row or instance in that order table. So you get the idea. Now, that's the first part, which I've said a lot here in a pretty short 7 minutes. But practically, you've just learned an entity, person, place, thing, or event, transaction about which we want to collect data. An entity has attributes, which are column headings, which are things that describe the entity. An entity also has instances, which are the rows. So a customer data entity has a customer an instance named Sam Smith, Jane Cook, that sort of thing. That's the first step, and I have to tell you, you are at least a third of the way of understanding data modeling. There's not that much more we need to know.